How's it going, everyone? Vlad here, and in this video we're going to talk about as to why you want to be using the industrial hardware as opposed to the general office PCs that I have demonstrated on this channel. And it is typically fine to purchase a Dell or a Lenovo PC for home office or just in general home lab use, but when we are talking about industrial panels, when we're talking about something a little bit more robust, you want to be deploying one of these, and this is a Teguar IPC, which we will unbox in just a moment and discuss as to why you may want to use this instead of, like I said, some of the non-robust solutions. But we're also going to talk about why Teguar specifically for the environments that I have experience in. We will be exhibiting a solution based on Teguar's IPC loaded with Ubuntu Linux, loaded with Portainer, Inductive Automation's Ignition, tied to controllers that you would normally see in a typical production environment, running simulated software depicting a manufacturing line, and then displaying all of that on a screen which you would normally see inside of SCADA and MES applications on general plant floors. So without any further delay, let's unbox the IPC and then talk about some of the use cases that you will be generally seeing them in. Let's see what we have inside of our box. On the side, rightfully so, it says Teguar Computers. We are expecting to see something a little bit smaller than this side. I'm assuming there's a lot of packaging material, so we're going to slice it open on the sides. We have a good amount of bubble wrap. And of course, we have the actual computer from Teguar. So I'm going to just set the shipping box aside. We have a label. We have the model number, which is the TB-7293. As you can see, we have the label of the CPU. I'm going to just remove the packaging tape, which was surprisingly already cut. And we have a couple of peripherals, I would assume. So we have a standard power supply, which is going to be 110 down to the power that we need. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So the power supply, again, we have a standard connector that you'd see in industrial applications. We have a power supply from EDAC Power Electric. We're going down to 24 volts DC, again, standard for the industrial space. That's what you'll find inside of the panels. We have what looks like our antennas for the wireless connection. I had requested those so that we can connect to a switch depending on the application. We have some brackets, I'm assuming for mounting. So I'm just going to remove all of the hardware from the packaging materials. We're going to set all of that aside. We have some extra spare connectors. Once again, it looks like we have some screws as well as a spare connector for the power supply. Let's finally take out the piece that we were looking for. So this is our Teguar IPC, which we will be using for a variety of different applications, but in this case we will be using this as a demo unit at Automate 2026. As you can see, we have quite a few ports. We'll discuss that in just a moment. I want to set all of the other parts aside so I can comfortably place this on this desk. We're going to zoom in and discuss it. All right, so we have the Teguar IPC on the desk. Let's have a quick look. So first and foremost, we have the 24 volt power supply that comes in right there. We're obviously going to power it on in just a moment. We have a couple of ports. We can immediately notice the large presence of USB connectors. Again, this could be used for peripherals. This could be used for vision systems. We have 4 different ports. We're going to see if they're individually addressable. I would assume so, but ultimately we can assign different IP addresses and thus put this on a variety of different networks as one may need in depending on the applications. We have your HDMI, your display port, we have a USB-C, we have remote power, we have a couple of other ports on the other side. So we have multiple COM ports, we have a GPIO port as well. This is where we will mount our antennas in just a few moments. We have a headphone jack, we have our power key, we have a few extra USB ports. These are 2.0. And if you're asking the question as to why you may need so many COM ports, in the industrial space, we have quite a few peripherals that still work on RS-232. So this could be your load cells, this could be your vision systems, this could be your Modbus connections. Again, there's a lot of different applications as to where you might need this. And if you're, again, curious on the model, this is the TB-7293 Core Ultra 5 125U series. And of course, we're going to power this on. The current plan is going to be to load Ubuntu Linux onto this IPC. We're then going to proceed to load Ignition. We're going to pull some data from our controllers or PLCs and present that inside of several Ignition screens. Hi, my name is Vladimir Romanov. I am the founder of Joltek as well as Solus PLC. With a background in electrical engineering and MBA, and over a decade of experience leading projects in manufacturing and industrial automation, I help engineers, managers, and manufacturers make smarter technical and business decisions, modernize their operations, and build stronger careers. If you're serious about manufacturing, automation, and staying ahead in the industry, subscribe and join the community. So let's talk about the general distinction between server-based hardware and an edge device, which is what this IPC actually is, right? And you can go to a variety of different vendors and you will find general server hardware that will live inside of a properly ventilated, properly enclosed, and a generally high availability type of a server room. So why would you need an edge solution? There's a couple of reasons based on my experience. So when you have a smaller to medium sized manufacturer, number one, there is no budget to deploy a proper server room. So you may want to look at alternatives as you start to collect data, as you start to process the data and present it to the personnel on site, or if you're looking to funnel some of that data into cloud solutions that may offset some of your CapEx and instead convert that into a subscription model which you can pay on a monthly basis. Now, whether or not it makes sense financially to just deploy the server room or to pay, for example, for AWS, Azure, or GCP for some of those processes is a separate conversation, but the main point here is that you can offset some of the costs of deploying a physical server room on site by deploying an edge solution that will funnel the data properly into a cloud-based application. It is very difficult to do so directly from the PLC into the cloud. It carries out different risks, cybersecurity concerns, and an ability to manage by IT. So again, the edge solutions are going to be perfect for those kinds of applications. From a more traditional control system standpoint, and I've talked about this on the whiteboard, I have a couple of videos explaining the nuances and the differences of, let's say, a standalone HMI versus a SCADA system. And in very brief, I would say there's a couple of points on HMI is going to control usually a single piece of equipment or a small area. The SCADA system is going to control an entire area or a multitude of different equipments. And so by using an edge solution, you have the flexibility depending on your application needs. So when we're talking about a standalone solution, if you're looking to, for example, deploy Ignition Edge, you can connect to a single PLC and you can run Ignition Edge to control one machine. Now, of course, that comes with some data capabilities and you can start storing information, but in many instances, if you're going to grow that into a SCADA, it will be difficult to do so depending on, number one, the hardware that you have selected, and of course the costs. There's going to be a difference between Ignition Edge as well as the full license of Ignition that's going to come at a premium. So if you're going to grow your application, or I guess if you want to start from something very simple, you can deploy Ignition Edge on something as small as a Raspberry Pi. You can absolutely control a single machine, but why would you want to choose something a little bit more robust? There's a couple of reasons. Number one, your control panels are going to be very different than your very well ventilated server rooms. So you need proper hardware to make sure that your instances of HMI solutions as well as your SCADA solutions last as long as your PLCs might. And you will see that in industrial industrial HMIs that typically, again, depending on the brand that you choose, but if you're looking at something like Rockwell, you're going to be spending 3 to 5 grand on a proper industrialized HMI. So the alternative, of course, is to get an IPC that is industrialized, that will go on a DIN rail, that will connect properly to your PLCs and other peripherals, and then last a long time to send that information to a screen, perhaps with a touch panel, or if it's a larger application, usually it is going to be an overhead screen to control a specific area with a operator type of a station where you have a mouse connected to that IPC with a proper display where they can control different areas of your SCADA system. Here's the story that I have promised you at the very beginning of this video. As some of you may know, I have extensive experience in the food and beverage space across the North American region, and for those of you who are not from North America, you may not know that the food and beverage space is very heavily regulated by the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration. And so they basically place a variety of different requirements to make sure that the quality of food that comes out of the manufacturing space is safe for consumption. And of course, these requirements are extremely important. However, these requirements also create a space where electronics don't always thrive or survive. I remember from my experience working on the Lunchables plant, where basically every single machine needed to be covered up and then sprayed down with water. And this is common procedure, especially for the process side. You want to eliminate the bacteria. You want to make sure that the space is washed down. Again, I don't remember all of the nuances. This is usually led by the quality department, but from what I remember, it's at least 3 times a week. You eliminate the bacteria. You make sure that the space is ready for the next process or batch. You don't want to contaminate any allergen, but what it boils down to is that there's a sanitation department at the plant that's going to execute a procedure with a variety of different steps to wash down every single machine that is going to come in contact with the food. At the time, the engineering and maintenance department had specified a variety of different vision systems that tied back to an IPC that were basically looking for quality defects, mainly on the packaging side, but some of it was also for overfill or underfill after the check wear for a final validation. So imagine for a moment that you have a package or a container where food is deposited, and then the vision system can then determine what the height of the product is to then feed that into the control system loop and say to add more ingredients or add less ingredients, depending, once again, if you're overfilling or you're underfilling. This is a standard application in the general manufacturing space. And so as we changed the procedure as to how some of those validations were conducted, the sanitation department was not notified in the best or direct way possible as to the installations of the actual hardware. But long story short is that when you give someone a high pressure hose to wash down equipment, your electronics are not going to be extremely fond of being sprayed with said water. And so in that specific instance, we had lost multiple tens of thousands of dollars of hardware on the camera side, on the IPC side, simply because the environment is not going to be conducive to, obviously, the survival of a variety of those electronics. And that is the reason why, number one, this is an IPC that is rated for a specific panel. It is rated for a specific moisture level. But if you visit the Teguar website or some of their competitors as well, you will find panels that are going to be rated for the food and beverage environment. And of course, if you're outside of food and bev or in a different verticals, if you're working with chemicals, even if you're working with automotive, you're not going to be in a washdown environment, but it's possible that a lot of our equipment is going to either end up outside, it's going to end up in moisture, and it becomes very easy to keep replacing either the HMI or the IPC or the vision system in that case, as opposed to getting the proper equipment set up in the first place. And so that is the reason why I remember walking past the Teguar presentations that they had done at ICC last year in 2025, and thinking to myself, they had some demos where water was being sprayed onto the HMI panel, how great it would have been to have installed some of their products at the facilities that I have been very intimately familiar with, and where we had basically lost a lot of equipment because we had not considered at the time the proper ratings for that specific hardware. The last point I want to make when it comes to specifically industrial hardware, and you obviously have seen, I hope by now, the Teguar IPC with a variety of different ports. You'll notice that there's a lot of USB ports, but you'll also notice that there's quite a few COM ports on the other side where we can plug in a variety of different peripherals. So if you look at this specific IPC from Dell, you'll notice that there's going to be multiple USB ports. There's not a single RS-232 port. There's going to be the same HDMI and display port. The answer is that in many instances, you do need access to Modbus, you do need access to RS-232 or RS-485, and those are protocols still utilized by a variety of different hardware in our industry. So a lot of times what happens is if you have a server deployment, you will then still need some kind of an edge gateway that will translate some of the protocols that I have just mentioned to signals that can be absorbed by that server. So if you can purchase or find a solution that already has many of those connectors in a space that requires them, it is an absolute plus. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. If you would like to see more of the hardware that we have showcased here, I invite you to Automate 2026. I will be showcasing a SCADA and an application where we will have an ignition-based solution pulling data from the PLCs that you will normally see in a production environment. We will be then displaying that information on a screen where you can control the line, you can see different metrics about the line. And so ultimately, if you have any questions, if you have any application notes, or if you would like to discuss some of the challenges that you might be facing where we can come in and help, don't hesitate to reach out.